When a homeless man approached Snoop Dogg on a bustling city street asking for just $1, no one could have predicted the remarkable chain of events that would follow. What started as a small gesture of kindness would grow into a movement that touched countless lives, reunited a fractured family, and gave hope to those who had nearly lost it. It all happened in Detroit, Michigan, a city buzzing with energy and resilience, where the lines between hardship and possibility often blur in the cold winter air. The city's heartbeat was relentless. Cars roared along the wide avenues, while pedestrians hurried across intersections, their voices mixing into a low hum of conversation. On the corner of Jefferson Avenue and 8th Street, not far from an old convenience store with chipped paint and flickering neon lights, a man sat leaning against the brick wall. His layers of worn clothing did little to protect him from the biting wind. A makeshift cardboard sign rested beside him, the words scrawled in fading marker, "Anything helps, God bless." His name was Marcus, though few people paused long enough to learn it. At 42, he found himself homeless after a series of devastating misfortunes stripped him of his job, his health, and the support network he once depended on. Each day, he watched pairs of shoes rushing by, worn boots, shiny dress shoes, sneakers of every style, but almost no one stopped. Marcus tugged the brim of his beanie lower, trying to shield himself from the cold. He was bracing for another day of disappointment when something unusual caught his eye. A pair of slick, high-end sneakers stopped just a short distance from where Marcus sat. They gleamed under the harsh streetlights, shoes so stylish they had to belong to someone with means and perhaps a taste for the spotlight. Marcus lifted his gaze to see a tall figure standing there, phone in hand, scrolling with an easy confidence. The onlookers had started to murmur quietly. Some reached for their phones, and Marcus could sense the shift in attention. Normally, he would never speak first unless someone acknowledged him. But this time, a spark of curiosity, or maybe desperation, made him call out. "Excuse me, man," Marcus said, clearing his throat against the icy air, "could you spare $1?" The figure in the fancy sneakers froze mid-scroll. Slowly, he raised his head, his gaze locking with Marcus. He was calm, poised, and far younger than Marcus would have expected. A few people in the growing crowd whispered as they recognized who it was. It was Snoop Dogg, the iconic musician who, despite his fame, looked surprisingly at ease on a windy street corner in Detroit. The city noise seemed to fade for a moment. Marcus braced himself for rejection. He knew it all too well, but he was determined at least to try. "What do you need it for?" Snoop asked, voice steady but not unkind. It wasn't a dismissive question, rather, it held genuine weight, as though he wanted to understand Marcus before deciding what to do. Marcus swallowed hard, his lips chapped from the cold. "A cup of coffee would be good," he answered, rubbing his hands together, "and maybe a sandwich if I'm lucky." He felt exposed under Snoop's calm stare. Snoop slid his phone into his pocket and stepped closer, unhurried and unbothered by the curious eyes around them. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks, half embarrassed and half grateful that someone was actually paying attention. Most people either tossed some loose change or hurried away, eager to avoid the sight of poverty. "What is your name?" Snoop asked. "Marcus," he replied, voice shaky but honest. Snoop nodded, as if filing the information away with care. "I'm Snoop," he said, with no hint of ego or self-importance. The moment felt strangely intimate, despite the crowd that had gathered and the constant roar of the traffic. Marcus watched with wary fascination as Snoop crouched down, meeting him at eye level. No one had ever done that before. It made Marcus feel like a human being again, not just another anonymous figure on the street. "How long have you been out here?" Snoop pressed, his question direct but not accusing. Marcus hesitated. Sharing his story usually brought nothing but pity or judgment, neither of which he could bear. But there was something disarming about Snoop's tone. "Almost a year," Marcus admitted. "I lost my job at the plant when they shut down." Then my health went downhill, couldn't keep up with the bills. Ended up on the streets. Snoop seemed to absorb every word, his brow furrowing with empathy. Marcus was used to seeing annoyance or disgust in people's eyes. But here, he saw neither. He saw someone who seemed to care, who might even want to help. Passers-by were recording now, their phones held aloft. The crowd had grown, some watchers murmuring in surprise at the unlikely duo, a homeless man and a world-famous musician, eye to eye on a chilly street corner in Detroit. "What about family?" Snoop asked gently. A twinge of pain flashed through Marcus's expression. "Don't really have much left. My parents passed a while back. I have a brother, but we haven't spoken in years. We lost touch, and I guess I lost everything else along the way." Snoop reached into his pocket. Marcus braced himself, expecting maybe $1 or $2. But when Snoop pulled his hand out, there was a crisp $100 bill between his fingers. Marcus stared in disbelief. "Here," Snoop said, extending the bill. "This should help you with more than coffee." Marcus's hands trembled as he took the money. "Are you for real?" he managed to stammer. "Why would you do that for me?" With a casual shrug, Snoop simply answered, "Because I can." He spoke quietly, yet there was conviction in his words. Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotions he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time, hope mixed with apprehension. But before Marcus could say another word, Snoop leaned in, speaking softly so the onlookers had to strain to hear. "Listen, it's not just about giving you money. I want you to promise me something." Marcus tightened his grip on the bill. "What's that?" "If I help you today," Snoop said firmly, "you've got to help yourself tomorrow. Deal?" Marcus felt a sting of tears threatening to surface, but he held them back. Nobody had challenged him like this in ages. "Deal," he croaked, finally finding the strength to speak. "Good," Snoop said, standing up. He looked around at the gathering crowd. Phones were pointed their way, whispers spread. Marcus felt his cheeks burn with self-consciousness. But Snoop seemed calm, unaffected by the cameras or the whispering. Reaching into his pocket again, Snoop took out a small notepad and scribbled something, then tore off the piece of paper. "Go here tomorrow morning," he said, handing Marcus the note. "It's the address of the Second Chance Community Center. Tell them Snoop sent you. They'll take care of you, give you a place to stay, some help finding work, medical checkups, all that. I'll let them know you're coming." Marcus carefully unfolded the paper, his eyes scanning the handwritten address. He'd heard of such resource centers but had always been too proud or too ashamed to walk in. Now, with Snoop's note in his hand, it felt different, like maybe he had someone rooting for him. "You serious?" Marcus asked again, the disbelief lingering. Snoop placed a reassuring hand on Marcus's shoulder, ignoring the cameras. "As serious as it gets. But remember our deal, you show up, you try. That's all I'm asking." Marcus nodded, unable to find the right words to express his gratitude. It wasn't just about the money. It was about someone seeing him, truly seeing him, and believing in him enough to give him a second chance. Snoop offered a small, encouraging smile, and then, just like that, he turned and walked away. The crowd parted, their whispers growing louder, but Snoop moved with steady purpose, disappearing into the city as swiftly as he had appeared. Marcus stayed on the cold pavement for a moment, the $100 bill clutched in one hand and the note in the other. He was overwhelmed by conflicting emotions: gratitude, embarrassment, hope, and fear. But a thin ray of determination began to shine through his doubts. Perhaps this was the lifeline he needed. The next day, Marcus stood outside the building Snoop had directed him to. It was a modest brick facility on a quieter street in Detroit, the sign above the entrance reading Second Chance Community Center. People trickled in and out, some carrying groceries, others wrapped in worn coats that spoke of hard times. Marcus felt his heart pound. He stuffed the note in his pocket for reassurance, then pushed open the door. Warmth enveloped him as he stepped inside. A welcoming area with worn chairs and a few faded posters on the walls greeted him. Behind the front desk, a woman with kind eyes looked up and smiled. "Can I help you?" she asked politely. Marcus took out the note, sliding it across the counter. "Snoop said to come here," he explained, his voice still shaky with uncertainty. The woman's eyes lit up. "Marcus, right? We've been expecting you," she said, gesturing for him to follow her. And so began a whirlwind of introductions and paperwork. Marcus was given a temporary bed, an appointment to see a doctor, and an overview of job training programs he could join. It was more help than he'd received in years, all delivered without judgment. That evening, Marcus sat on the edge of his assigned cot, replaying the past 24 hours in his mind. The impossible had happened, a celebrity had not only noticed him but gone out of his way to help. The question now was whether Marcus could live up to the promise he'd made. He resolved that he would at least try. What Marcus didn't know was that the brief encounter on Jefferson Avenue had been captured on multiple cell phones and shared across social media. Within hours, the footage of Snoop Dogg crouched beside a homeless man went viral, racking up millions of views. People debated fiercely in the comments, was this a publicity stunt or a genuine act of compassion? Most were inclined to see it as something authentic, a rare spark of humanity from a public figure who genuinely seemed to care. For Marcus, however, the outside world's judgment mattered less than the steady progress he was making. In his first counseling session at the center, he spoke about his struggles and his regrets. The staff listened without condescension, helping him outline small, realistic steps toward rebuilding his life. He filled out job applications, attended meetings, and tried to confront the ghosts of his past. Meanwhile, the video continued to spread, drawing attention not just to Snoop's surprising gesture but also to the broader issue of homelessness. Donations and volunteer applications poured into the Second Chance Community Center. People from all over the city and even beyond found themselves moved to help in some capacity, whether by contributing clothes, funds, or their time. The entire center was abuzz with a renewed sense of purpose. By the end of the first week, Marcus began noticing subtle but powerful changes within himself. He walked a little taller, spoke with a little more confidence, and no longer felt invisible. The staff treated him not as a problem but as a person full of potential. Others in the shelter, people who had once seemed resigned to despair, approached him. "Heard about you, man," one said. "Saw that video. If you can get help, maybe I can, too." Marcus tried to offer the same encouragement Snoop had given him, a belief that redemption, though difficult, was within reach. Outside the shelter, though, Marcus's story had evolved into a national conversation. Television segments replayed the footage, and online debates raged about celebrity influence, the responsibility of the wealthy, and what it truly meant to help. Snoop himself refused interviews, saying this wasn't about his own image. He quietly ensured the shelter received more financial support, leveraging his platform to make sure his simple act of kindness could turn into something sustainable. The city of Detroit, meanwhile, found itself drawn into a wave of empathy. Local businesses offered job openings to shelter residents. Doctors volunteered free checkups. Individuals started grassroots campaigns to help not just Marcus but others who had fallen on hard times. Hashtags like #KindnessChallenge and #SecondChance trended on various social platforms, inspiring people far beyond the state of Michigan to contribute or start initiatives of their own. For Marcus, the ripples became deeply personal one night when a familiar face walked into the shelter's common area, a man looking both determined and anxious. Marcus blinked, trying to recognize the figure. Then, realization struck like a bolt of lightning. Derek? Marcus said, voice catching in his throat. It was his younger brother, the one he had lost touch with years ago. Derek approached slowly, eyes damp with emotion. I saw the video going around, realized it was you. I'm sorry I didn't try harder to find you before things got this bad. He hesitated, then placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. You're my brother. I'm here now. Tears threatened to spill down Marcus's cheeks. He had braced himself for abandonment so many times that genuine care felt overwhelming. I appreciate it, he managed to say, voice shaking. I know I didn't make it easy for anyone to help me. Reconciliation was as sweet as it was painful, reminding them both of the lost years. But in that moment, the two brothers decided the future might hold a chance for healing. Marcus felt a surge of gratitude not just for Snoop's initial kindness, but for every single person who had believed in him since. As the weeks went on, Marcus's sense of self-worth grew steadily stronger. He saw his story as proof that even at rock bottom, it was possible to climb back up when someone offered a hand. And he also realized that Snoop had given him more than money or an address. He had given Marcus a reason to believe in the kindness of strangers again. But there was something else happening in Detroit and beyond. Marcus's story had become a catalyst for people to question their assumptions about homelessness and about how small gestures could create monumental change. The local media highlighted similar acts of generosity, further driving donations to shelters and prompting policy discussions at City Hall. People who had once walked past individuals like Marcus without a second glance found themselves moved to share a few words, a meal, or even a job opportunity. Over time, Marcus managed to secure a part-time position in a nearby diner washing dishes at first, then gradually learning some cooking skills. The staff at the Second Chance Community Center helped him manage his medical appointments, and his health began to improve. Derek visited often, and they tentatively rebuilt their bond over cups of coffee and long talks about the past. For Marcus, every step forward felt surreal, as though he were dreaming a reality he'd once believed impossible. Then came the day a staff member showed Marcus a news piece featuring him. He watched with a mix of pride and discomfort as reporters recounted the story of how Snoop had crouched on that frigid Detroit street to have a conversation that lasted only minutes but ultimately changed the course of Marcus's life. Footage of their encounter replayed, capturing the raw vulnerability on Marcus's face and the determined calm in Snoop's. Marcus barely recognized himself on screen. He saw a man at his lowest point, and it reminded him how far he'd come in such a short time. He thought again of Snoop's parting words, if I help you today, you've got to help yourself tomorrow. That promise, simple as it was, became his driving force. In the following weeks, donations continued pouring into the shelter, and Marcus found himself in a new role. He started volunteering when he wasn't working at the diner, helping new arrivals adjust just as the staff had once done for him. He shared his story privately, encouraging others not to give up. Slowly but surely, he realized that by helping others, he was also healing himself. As his confidence grew, Marcus reached out beyond the shelter, speaking at small community gatherings where he explained the importance of compassion and second chances. His tale of going from hopelessness to renewed faith in himself resonated with those who were struggling and those who wanted to make a difference but weren't sure how. Whenever people asked about Snoop, Marcus would smile and say, he lit the spark, but I had to keep the fire going. At the same time, Snoop stayed mostly under the radar. He ignored interviews and social media hype, content to know that the resources he provided were being used effectively. He remained in quiet contact with the director of the Second Chance Community Center, offering funds or connections whenever they could make a meaningful impact. For Marcus, the collision of personal trials and sudden fame was both exciting and overwhelming. He had never wanted to be in the spotlight. Yet now, with every step forward he took, someone was there to applaud or question him. But he realized that if sharing his journey meant other lives could be changed for the better, it was worth facing the scrutiny. Derek, too, found a sense of closure in reconnecting with Marcus. The brothers had a long road to mending old wounds, but they found hope in each other's presence. The bitterness that once weighed them down gave way to small, cautious gestures of familial love, cups of coffee shared at the diner, phone calls to check in, and plans for a better future. Neither of them felt alone anymore, and that in itself was a miracle. By now, the city had embraced Marcus's story as a symbol of Detroit's resilient spirit, people helping people, communities coming together. News outlets moved on to other stories, but the ripple effects remained. Residents still talked about that day on Jefferson Avenue, when a single act of compassion from a recognizable figure sparked a wave of positivity. Local initiatives sprouted up, providing training programs, mental health counseling, and other resources for those on the brink of homelessness. And Marcus, who once thought he had lost everything, now had a sense of purpose. He understood that a single moment of kindness could lead to monumental change, not just for one person but for countless others who witnessed or heard about it. Life was still challenging, money was tight, and the future unpredictable. But he felt ready to face those challenges, knowing he had a network of support behind him and a personal promise to fulfill. That promise had set him on a path of accountability. Each step he took felt like another victory against the doubt and despair that had nearly consumed him. Every small success, a day's work at the diner, a medical checkup that confirmed his health was improving, a heartfelt conversation with his brother reminded him that he was moving forward.